They were the icons of their time, men who defined charm, grit, and screen presence. But as the years went by, even the most legendary faces weren't immune to the pressures of Hollywood's obsession with youth. In today's episode of Classic Hollywood, we explore the fascinating and sometimes shocking cosmetic transformations of male stars we thought we knew. Their journeys tell stories of resilience, regret, reinvention, and above all, the price of fame. Stay tuned, because some of these revelations will leave you speechless. Number 1, Simon Cowell. From tough judge to talked about transformation. Simon Cowell wasn't just the no-nonsense face of American Idol. He was a cultural force. With his trademark smirk, tight black t-shirts, and razor-sharp critiques, Cowell built a persona around authenticity and blunt honesty. He was the man who didn't play by Hollywood's rules and made a fortune doing it. But as the spotlight stayed fixed on him over the decades, something began to shift. First subtly, then dramatically. In the early 2000s, Cowell's appearance aligned perfectly with his image. Rugged, unfussy, and unapologetically real. Yet by 2008, fans started to notice the faint signs of cosmetic enhancement, most notably smoother skin and a tauter brow. Cowell didn't shy away from it. He admitted to using Botox, even remarking in a now-famous quote, "Every guy I know has had it now." That confession marked more than just personal openness. It signaled a turning point in how masculinity and vanity were discussed in pop culture. Simon, always ahead of the curve, was reflecting a larger trend. Men feeling increasing pressure to maintain a youthful look in an industry that punishes visible aging, especially in the unforgiving world of high-definition television. As the years went on, the changes became more noticeable. By his mid-50s, Cowell's face appeared tighter, more sculpted, and, at times, almost wax-like. Experts speculated he had undergone not just Botox, but eyelid surgery, facial fillers, and even neck-lifting procedures. The iconic music mogul, once known for defying the Hollywood machine, was now fully entrenched in one of its deepest obsessions: the pursuit of eternal youth. Then came a wake-up call, not from a critic, but from Cowell himself. After a serious electric bike accident in 2017, he embraced a healthier lifestyle, cutting out red meat, alcohol, and sugar, and focusing on wellness. This physical reboot seemed to mirror an emotional one. By 2019, Cowell shifted his approach to cosmetic care, opting for more natural-looking treatments like the Silhouette Soft Lift, a procedure that repositions the skin without the heavy, artificial look of fillers. He even became a vocal advocate for moderation, advising others not to go too far. But the public wasn't done noticing. By 2022, Cowell appeared at a public event with such a dramatically altered face that it sparked a wave of concern and speculation. Critics weren't just commenting on the aesthetics. They were questioning the toll that fame, pressure, and relentless reinvention had taken. Cowell responded with rare vulnerability, saying, "There was a phase where I might have gone a bit too far. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror." That moment of self-reflection was powerful and rare. In a culture where aging men are still expected to be effortlessly ageless, Cowell's honesty pierced through the facade. His journey serves as a mirror not only for celebrity culture, but for everyday men who quietly face the same insecurities. He has since pulled back, letting his features settle into something more natural. Aged perhaps, but also grounded. Number 2, Mickey Rourke. A face marked by battles, both public and private. Mickey Rourke was once the very definition of brooding Hollywood masculinity. In the 1980s, he oozed raw charisma with performances in Diner, 1982, 9.5 Weeks, 1986, and Angel Heart, 1987, that made him a heartthrob and a critical darling. He wasn't just a pretty face, he was a phenomenon. But the Mickey Rourke we see today is nearly unrecognizable from the young rebel who once lit up the screen. His is not just a story of cosmetic surgery gone wrong. It's a complex journey of identity, pain, resilience, and ultimately, redemption. In the early 1990s, at the height of his fame, Rourke made an unexpected and dangerous choice. He walked away from Hollywood to pursue a career in professional boxing. It wasn't a publicity stunt. Rourke was serious, and it nearly destroyed him physically. Between 1991 and 1994, he fought 8 professional bouts. The cost? A shattered nose, crushed cheekbones, and multiple concussions. What followed was a long and painful series of reconstructive surgeries, many of them medically necessary, but ultimately altering his appearance forever. Rourke later admitted he chose the wrong surgeon, and the results were often more damaging than healing. The first procedures were attempts to fix the injuries, but as time passed, he sought further surgeries to recapture what had been lost. The face and perhaps the confidence that made him a star. By the early 2000s, Mickey Rourke's face had become a topic of constant conversation. Public fascination peaked with his appearance in Sin City, 2005, where makeup masked some of the transformation, and The Wrestler, 2008, where he delivered a raw, award-winning performance that mirrored his own life. The battered face, the aging fighter, the man with nothing left to lose. It wasn't just acting, it was autobiographical. And perhaps what sets Mickey Rourke apart is that he never tried to hide it. He didn't make excuses, he didn't blame Hollywood, he simply said, "My face tells a story." Not always a pretty one, but it's honest. That honesty, painful, vulnerable, and brave, is what made fans reconnect with him. Not just as a movie star, but as a man who had truly been through the fire. Number 3. Carrot Top. Laughter, muscles, and the price of visibility. To many, Carrot Top was once the poster child for absurd, prop-driven comedy. With his wild, flaming red curls and elastic expressions, Scott Thompson carved out a unique space in the 1990s comedy scene. He wasn't polished or conventional, but he was unforgettable. Yet by the mid-2000s, fans who hadn't seen him in a while were stunned. The wiry, eccentric comedian had transformed into a bulked-up, chiseled figure with noticeably altered facial features. It was so dramatic, many wondered. What happened to Carrot Top? His story is one of evolution, but not the kind that's often celebrated. Because behind the jokes and the spectacle was a man fighting to remain relevant in a world where aging is rarely kind to comedians, and even less so to male performers who refuse to fit the mold. In the early 2000s, Carrot Top began turning heads. Not for his comedy, but for his physique. He'd developed an intense muscular build that felt at odds with his previously lanky frame. Speculation ran wild. Was it heavy gym training? Steroids? Injections? But what truly fueled the gossip wasn't his body. It was his face. Changes around his eyes, brow, and cheekbones had fans wondering if he'd gone under the knife. Side-by-side comparisons from appearances on The Tonight Show in the 90s versus the mid-2000s revealed striking contrast. His once youthful expressions looked frozen, his signature wide-eyed charm replaced with a more sculpted, almost artificial mask. Carrot Top, ever the comic, laughed it off. He blamed bad lighting, poor makeup, and even joked that he just aged weird. But the whispers continued, and so did the assumptions. Plastic surgeons who hadn't treated him but studied his appearance publicly speculated he had undergone brow lifts, eyelid surgery, cheek augmentation, and fillers. While Thompson never confirmed the details, the impact on his public image was undeniable. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of retreating, Carrot Top doubled down. He continued performing. He filled theaters in Las Vegas. He leaned into the caricature, mixing absurdity with vulnerability. Over time, what once drew ridicule began to invite respect. He never asked for pity, and he never pretended to be something he wasn't. In doing so, he challenged a deeper, often ignored narrative. What does the world expect a male comedian to look like? Why should female stars be criticized for aging badly, while male stars are mocked for trying not to? Number 4. Cary Grant. The gentleman who aged like a legend. Cary Grant wasn't just a movie star, he was the movie star. Suave, sophisticated, effortlessly charming. He embodied the kind of elegance and masculinity that seemed untouchable. On screen, he was always composed, always captivating. Off-screen, however, Grant was far more deliberate about the timeless image he projected. But what most fans never knew was that his iconic look wasn't entirely natural. Behind the flawless tuxedo and debonair smile was a man quietly and masterfully curating his appearance through the decades. Born Archibald Leach in Bristol, England, Cary Grant was no overnight success. He crafted himself into Cary Grant with precision, polishing every detail from voice to posture to facial features. That transformation began in the 1930s when Paramount Studios invested in subtle but significant dental work for the rising star. In 1932, records show Grant underwent a series of procedures to straighten, whiten, and even replace some teeth. The result? A smile that would soon become one of the most recognizable in cinematic history. As the years went by and his career soared through classics like North by Northwest and To Catch a Thief, Grant continued to refine, not reinvent, his image. Unlike many stars, he embraced aging, but also ensured it didn't interfere with his screen presence. In the 1950s, as he entered his 50s and continued playing romantic leads, Grant reportedly underwent upper eyelid surgery, a subtle blepharoplasty to correct sagging lids that made him appear tired on camera. The change was slight, almost imperceptible. But that was Grant's genius. Enhance, never erase. Alfred Hitchcock, who directed Grant in several films, once commented on how the actor always looked refreshed, but never artificial. In an era when plastic surgery was taboo, especially for men, Grant managed his image like a vintage car, fine-tuned, high-functioning, and utterly classic. Behind that discipline was a man who understood the power of illusion, but also the importance of authenticity. Longtime friend Katharine Hepburn once quipped, "Cary maintained himself like a Rolls-Royce. Not flashy, just purring beneath the hood." He wasn't chasing youth, he was preserving grace. And perhaps that's why he continues to resonate with generations of fans. He aged with intention, not desperation. He didn't let the roles define his look, he made his look define the roles. Dermatologists and surgeons who've studied his photos agree. Grant's enhancements were conservative and skillfully timed. Instead of erasing time, he slowed it down just enough to keep playing the part, but never at the expense of character. Number 5. Robert Redford, the golden boy who aged on his own terms. In the golden age of American cinema, Robert Redford was more than just a leading man. He was a symbol. With his sun-kissed hair, piercing blue eyes, and understated charm, Redford became the face of a new kind of masculinity in the 1960s and 70s. Quiet, confident, and deeply compelling. But as time moved on and the cameras kept rolling, Redford made a decision few stars dared to. He didn't fight aging, he respected it. In his prime, Redford radiated natural charisma. From Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, to The Way We Were, 1973, and All the President's Men, 1976. He represented a rugged, intelligent elegance that didn't need to shout to be heard. But like all stars who endure, Redford eventually had to reckon with the changing face of fame. Quite literally. By the mid-1980s, as he neared 50, subtle shifts in his appearance sparked quiet speculation. Puffy under eyes, softened jawlines. Nothing drastic, but enough to suggest that the passage of time had arrived. Rather than ignore it or go into full-scale reinvention mode, Redford took what might be called the minimalist's approach to maintenance. Experts believe he may have undergone a conservative lower facelift and minor eyelid correction, procedures that gently enhanced his natural contours without sacrificing expression. He never confirmed any of it. In fact, in a 2007 interview, Redford said, "I think a person has the right to do whatever they want." It wasn't a denial, but a statement of autonomy, a declaration that if any work was done, it was his choice, not the public's business. Makeup artists and colleagues who worked closely with him often remarked that Redford had a unique understanding of the camera. He knew how it read every line, every shadow, and adjusted just enough to remain present, not preserved. By the early 1990s, during films like A River Runs Through It, his aging was visible, but graceful. Nothing about him seemed forced. As he transitioned into directing and producing, founding the Sundance Institute, his public image matured alongside his professional identity. And by his 70s and 80s, Redford fully leaned into his natural aging process. The sunspots, the silver hair, the creases around the eyes, all became part of his legacy. Not flaws, but features of a life fully lived. Film critic Richard Roper once said of Redford in 2018, "There's real grace in how he looks now. He wears time like a well-cut suit." Number 6. Kenny Rogers. A voice of gold, a face that told a story. Few voices are as instantly recognizable or as deeply comforting as that of Kenny Rogers. With timeless hits like The Gambler, Lucille, and Islands in the Stream, Rogers wasn't just a country music legend, he was a cross-genre icon, bridging Southern soul and pop stardom with effortless charm. But as the years passed and the spotlight lingered, fans began to notice something changing, not in his voice, but in his face. What followed was a transformation that stirred headlines, sparked debate, and ultimately led to one of the most refreshingly honest admissions in modern celebrity culture. In the early 1990s, as Rogers approached his 50s, he was still filling arenas and making chart-topping music. But he, like so many public figures, felt the quiet pull of time. He began exploring cosmetic surgery, not out of vanity, he later said, but to stay stage-ready. His first procedures addressed sagging eyelids, a common issue that can make performers appear tired or disconnected under the lights. Unlike many celebrities of the era, Rogers didn't hide it. In a 2006 interview, he openly shared, "I had quite a bit of plastic surgery. I had my eyes done and a facelift." At the time, he was pleased with the results. The face looking back at him in the mirror seemed to reflect the energy and charisma he still felt inside. But the story didn't end there. Over the next decade, Rogers underwent additional procedures, and by the late 2000s, the results became more dramatic. His eyes appeared unusually tight, his expressions muted, and the natural, weathered charm that had long defined him seemed to fade into something more sculpted, less human. Fans took notice. So did Rogers. In a rare moment of humility and clarity, he spoke again. This time, not to defend, but to reflect. "It makes me look like I'm surprised all the time," he said with a gentle laugh during a 2012 interview. The remark was disarming, not just because of its honesty, but because of the courage it took to say it. In an industry where men rarely discuss cosmetic procedures, let alone regrets, Rogers opened a door others were too afraid to approach. And in doing so, he shifted the conversation from shame to self-awareness. By the time he published his memoir, Luck or Something Like It, Rogers had made peace with his choices. He acknowledged what worked, what didn't, and most importantly, why he did it. It wasn't about vanity, it was about trying to match the world's expectations with the image he saw in the mirror. But as he grew older, he realized that peace didn't come from procedures. It came from letting go. In his final years, Rogers pulled back from the spotlight, embraced his natural self, and focused on family, faith, and music. His fans didn't love him less, they loved him more. Because what remained was what had always mattered most: his voice, his soul, and his truth. Number 7, Kirk Douglas. The warrior who faced time with courage. Kirk Douglas wasn't just a movie star, he was a force of nature. With that famously cleft chin, piercing glare, and booming voice, Douglas defined a generation of screen heroes. From Spartacus to Paths of Glory, he didn't just play strong men. He embodied strength itself. But as he aged, Douglas made a decision that separated him from many of his peers. He would face time head-on, and he'd be honest about it. By the mid-1970s, Douglas was approaching 60. Most actors at that age would be considering retirement. Douglas? He was still taking on demanding roles, still commanding the screen with that fiery intensity. But even a gladiator isn't immune to the march of time. Rather than fade quietly or undergo drastic makeovers in secret, Douglas chose a middle path. He opted for a subtle facelift, focusing on the neck and jawline, just enough to soften the signs of aging while preserving the expressive force of his face. And in true Kirk Douglas fashion, he didn't whisper about it. He owned it. In a 1988 interview, he said plainly, "Everyone does it. I'm just more upfront about it than most." That one sentence summed up everything people loved about him. Bold, unfiltered, and unashamed. Over the next 2 decades, Douglas underwent a few additional procedures, including brow lifts and eyelid surgeries, especially as television cameras grew more unforgiving. But while the changes were visible, he never let them distort the essence of who he was. The signature voice, the commanding presence, the emotional vulnerability, all remained intact. Even after a debilitating stroke in 1996, Douglas refused to vanish. He worked tirelessly to regain his speech, returned to public life, wrote books, gave speeches, and continued appearing on screen and on stage, even with a changed face and slurred speech. Where many saw decline, Douglas showed resilience. His son, actor Michael Douglas, once remarked, "My father never tried to hide from time. He respected it, and that made him timeless." Kirk Douglas understood something most stars never quite grasp, that the more real you are, the more legendary you become. And as the decades wore on, his evolving appearance became less about cosmetic tweaks and more about a life lived fully and shared openly. Cosmetic surgeon Dr. Stephen Hofflin once noted that while Douglas's early procedures were subtle and well executed, the later ones were more pronounced, showing the natural limits of even the best medical intervention. But in the end, those lines and scars didn't take away from his image. They added to it. Each crease, each shift and contour told a story not of vanity, but of tenacity. If these stories moved you, made you reflect, or even surprised you, let us know. Drop a comment below. Who inspired you the most? Which transformation shocked you or made you think differently? And don't forget to tap like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode of Classic Hollywood, where we honor the legends not just for how they looked, but for who they became. Because in the end, it's not about staying young, it's about aging with meaning. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.